Welcome to the Power of Eight. My name is Jennifer Smith, and co-hosting with me as well is Pollyanna Blanco. We are on chapter 4. Each week we go through each chapter of the Power of Eight book. There we go. So if you want to grab that book and join us every Wednesday, we go through the chapter and then we talk about our experiences as it relates to that. So today is chapter 4 called Mental Trespassers. And so we'll go ahead and get started with that. The very first line was the power of 8 groups could also create a psychic internet. So that was one that I had highlighted in their power of 8 groups. That's what they were seeing was the psychic internet when the group would concentrate on a certain thought, healing thought, intention for other people, that they would see that actually happen. So, Paulina, what do you think about that? A psychic internet with a group of people.
It's a fascinating chapter. And for anyone who's ever had any hesitations or doubts or questions about it, there's so much science that she dives into to back it up. And she talks about her own experiments and really dives into it. And at the heart of it, it's just she also opens with a powerful example of a healing that happened with the Power of 8 groups. Where there was a mother who had asked her Power of 8 group to send a special intention to her son who'd been in a motorcycle accident. And 2 months later, she wrote with a progress report that after the Power of 8 group's intention and follow-up intentions by his family members, her son had begun to move his upper body and had even been able to move his toes, because the doctors originally thought it would have taken him 6 months to a year, and instead it took him 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because there were fears that he might have even become a quadriplegic. So it really grabs your attention right on the very first page of this chapter. What she starts to talk about throughout with the psychic internet is that, she started to realize that they'd achieved it without any link to him, no live connection or photo of him, no knowledge of him or of his whereabouts. I'm just peeking at my notes here. No connection with him whatsoever, except his mother and her thoughts about him. So this whole chapter is really getting into the power of group prayer, group healing circles, and the science behind it. Just out of curiosity, Jennifer, what jumped out for you in this chapter?
Well, I love the science backing it, and so I think there's very good education about just the energy, that how Curlian photography, how he had developed the photography back in 1939, which proved that we have the energy. All living things have this energy. People, places, or people, animals, plants, and then his work was taken. So this has been around for a really long time. So if people are trying to understand that part of it, and this is what we teach in energy healing classes too, we kind of go back and name some of the science things that are already out in the world and have been there for a long time. And then that scientific information was taken even further into what's called a gas discharge visualization. And this was also a Russian scientist who the device was used. Now it's like more computerized, where it's giving you the energy and the readouts in the device. I think this is important. So I'm just going to read this one paragraph so people can hear it and then they can research a little bit more. This is on page 41, about the mid-page, but it said by 2007, the GDV device, which is the gas discharge visualization, which is reading the energy, was widely used as a general diagnosis tool and as a means to evaluate a patient's progress after surgery. And the Russian Ministry of Sport had begun to take notice of Korotkov and his machinery, even using it to assess the state of athletes training for the Olympics. So outside Russia, thousands of medical practitioners were using his machines, a fact not overlooked by Americans' National Institutes of Health. And indeed, a portion of Gary Schwartz's grant was to be used to investigate the biofield using this equipment. So I thought that was interesting. We talked about how much grant money was given for some of these scientific researches, and now they're using this grant money to look at this equipment, and the equipment measures energy, which gives you an indication of how healthy a person is. So to me, that's pretty amazing. It kind of connects the dots to, to what we do as energy healers, along to more the, the traditional medical doctors. So if we could stream all that together, that would be wonderful.
And just to piggyback off the comments that in the excerpt you just shared, it's just to reemphasize it was all that GDV machine is all about. The discharge machine is all about measuring the light emissions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's more subtler on a molecular level of looking at the gas discharge emissions. Another word maybe is the luminosity, right? And so it really brings home this truth that we are, a lot of spiritual traditions have known this for centuries and longer, that we are light beings first. And that, because there's a part later on, and I'm just going to put my readers on that,
Yeah, go ahead.
because it's actually really interesting just to add, just a little bit of background, because, we as energy healers, we kind of know this from our experience of working on ourselves and working with clients. And at the same time, when people are sort of bridging and stepping into, everything that we sort of take as commonplace, the science can be reassuring to the mind of form, right? And it has been, we were talking about that last show for both of us too in our own journey. So I like on page 48 how there's sort of a little bit of a recap about the difference between the Newtonian universe and the quantum. And I feel it's worth mentioning now. I'm going to read it. It's a little bit longer, but I think it really says it nice and succinctly, that the first experiments had been rudimentary, even a bit crude, but their implications were enormous. They even challenged certain Newtonian laws that form the backbone of classical physics. Newton described a well-behaved universe of separate objects acting according to fixed laws in time and space. And one of the most fundamental of these is his first law, the idea that any given object remains at rest or continues to move at a constant velocity unless acted upon by an external force. It's that external physical force, the 3D kind of basis for a lot of the Newtonian ideas out there. And so in that law is embodied the cornerstone of many confident assumptions we make about how the world works. The notion that things are static, separate, and inviolate unless something physical, some force, and this is like a push, a punch, a swift kick, is done to them. Indeed, all of Newton's laws describe things that exist independently of each other and require some physical, measurable energy to change, even to move. So this is where, the difference between energy healing and more allopathic medicine. And again, I believe in complementary. I'm not, trying to create a divide here by saying that. I believe that the best, solutions are when we work together in partnership. It's just that when we only have one sort of perspective on, health and well-being, we kind of truncate the other possibilities, right? And because one's looking at, physically what's going on in the body, what needs to be replaced, taken out, removed, added in, which is very much that, Newtonian approach. And then the quantum approach is more looking at it from a different perspective. And she says here, very little about our experiments reflected anything we could regard as a Newtonian view of the world. And that's why a lot of times the stuff is discarded as woo-woo, fluffy bunny, kind of stuff, right? She said we weren't doing, italics, anything to an object. We were thinking, italics, thinking to that object. The effects we were recording were more akin to the rogue behavior quantum physics, as first defined by Niels Bohr and his protege, the German physicist Werner Heisenberg. They recognized a few fundamental aspects of the quantum universe. In the world of the tiny, things aren't actually things yet, but only a tiny cloud of probability, a potential of any one of its future selves, or what is known by physicists as a superposition or sum of all probabilities. So it's this whole idea of when we focus on something, we notice something, the pure potential collapses into one particular identifiable state. So the final sort of nugget she arrives at through this kind of quantum approach, which is really the energy healing perspective on it all, is the power of the observer effect, which the next chapter is going to build on even more. And the moment we look at an electron or take a measurement, we help to determine its final stage. So the most essential ingredient in creating our universe is the consciousness that observes it. Nothing in the universe exists as an actual thing independently of our perception of it, of our conscious awareness of it. So that's what, really nailed it for me when I was reading this, because the psychic internet is all about, the blurred boundaries between objects seeming separate, which is really interesting, because before we hopped on to talk about all of this, and we were talking about actually boundaries when it comes to the psychic internet, and how while we live in a quantum universe where everything is interconnected, there's this sort of paradox too, that if we are doing energy healing work, permission is really important. We don't want to, even for our own self-care as sensitives, be picking up on everything in the field like a sponge, a big psychic sponge, to protect and shield our own energy. So it's like there is a very different worldview when we get into what these experiments are revealing, which is so interesting and fascinating. And at the same time, knowing that, it's all a possibility. And when we tune into it, then it makes it a thing for us. There is that piece that there's a blurred boundaries. And at the same time, I don't know if you want to speak to that, Jennifer, because I know with working with your healing clients too, I know for me, when I work with clients, it's really important before I send healing energy to someone to ask for their permission. And also I set intentions in my own life. We were talking about this beforehand, where I, don't, what I do, sorry to rephrase it differently, is I am clear about, like say when we're dreaming at night, where I do want to go and where I don't want to go, just to be clear about like not opening myself up to something that it just having those, I'm stumbling over my words here, but you know what I'm talking about, right? Like sort of
The intentions, the pure intentions. And
yeah.
I always ask permission. I always make sure that I have permission prior to healing. I mean, most of my clients come to me or ask me for it, but even when family needs some healing, like if they have a surgery or something, and then I'm texting with them, I'll ask even my brother or my mom, would you like for me to send you some healing? So always intentions, no matter who it is, even if I know that they're probably going to say yes. But yeah, I think that's important for me. It's just one of my rules for myself that I follow.
And I just feel guided to bring that up as we're talking about how the quantum perspective offers us this like psychic internet, because I can also see the temptation when people are just awakening to this awareness to be like, oh, goody gumdrops, like I can connect with anyone over time, space, distance, it doesn't matter. And sometimes, we have like pure intentions to, we want to see someone who's suffering feel better and have their suffering alleviated. And at the same time, there are still certain laws of the universe. And there, I believe those laws are there because we are living in a quantum universe where there is still an energetic accountability for our choices, actions, and decisions, where we have to also respect the free will of other people as well too. So as
Absolutely.
much as we may desire a certain outcome for someone and have the, good intentions to alleviate their suffering, just as a caveat for anyone who's listening, who's kind of newer to the spiritual awakening journey, if it's exciting to know that this is a quantum universe and you can access and send energy and healing anywhere, it's not the Wild West. Like there is a checks and balances system, whether it's immediately, noticeable or not to you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other part of that is, we don't always know what honoring that free will, we don't always know what other people's journeys are. So maybe there's something along their journey that they want to learn, that they need to encounter before they would come for that healing. I don't
Mhm.
know. I don't know the answer for them. So that's why permission is important as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. There were a few other things in this chapter because it says mental trespassers. So I wanted to kind of go along with that. She was talking about the healing, and it didn't really correlate with like the more people you have sending the intentions didn't always correlate that healing happened the fastest. So it wasn't even just a small group with the intentions sometimes had better results. And you mentioned this earlier, but I think it's worth mentioning again that it's not you didn't have to be this people didn't have to be in the same room together. Like there's a group of 8 people, they don't have to be in the same room together to do the healing intention. They can be anywhere in the world. They don't even have to be on like a Zoom call like this. They don't even have to be connected in this way. It was more of just having that same space time of sending that intention for healing is what seemed to be important. And she said also what seemed to be noteworthy, um, I thought this was interesting, and I believe it's true too, that it was the practice of people who were meditators or healers, seem to have really powerful results as well. So I think it's the clearing of that mind, the practice that we put into that to help, heal other people.
That's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up, Jennifer, because it is that regular, consistent practice, to that amplifies the intentions too. Because when the mind is scattered, it diffuses the power of the intention. When we're able to hold a single focus,
Mhm.
then we amplify our intentions. So it's more that also brings to a subtle discernment too, that intentions are more than just a thought. They are a full embodiment of presence, which is very
Mhm.
different from a thought. And I don't, that just came through right now. I wasn't planning on saying that, because I think sometimes I've heard it out there. Maybe you have too, that people sometimes think the word thought and intention are sort of to some degree interchangeable. And and our thoughts are powerful. It's not to discount that they're not. It's just when we can quiet the mind enough to hold a single focus and to imbue it with it's beyond there's the feeling, and the feeling I would say is even beyond the emotionality. And I think that's sometimes too something that it's just something I've been exploring in my own journey, because there the feeling is that presence as opposed to the emotionality, because there's that discernment too between emotional joy and spiritual joy. And emotional joy is more that up and down fluctuating wave of emotion, which I think can also diffuse our intentions. Whereas when we're in that still, calm, centered, grounded place inside of ourselves, where everything's still calm and quiet, there aren't those fluctuations of the emotional body. Instead, it's more the consciousness itself noticing the point of focus and like a laser beam directing that focus and being aware of it all, including the sensations, which suggests it's anchored in the physical form, the presence itself. So I would say it's more sensate feelings of the embodiment more than the emotionality itself. And that the joy that people talk about when they're talking about that focus in terms of it being amplified is more that spiritual joy than the emotional joy, the spiritual joy that comes from that true sense of connection to your purpose in that moment, to be of service from a clear, pure intention and neutral place.
Yeah, when you're talking about the grounding and that feeling, it's like that pure connection to source.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's a frequency. And I
Yes.
feel like whenever we have this frequency that's within us and we hold the intention of healing, that's part of the powerful force, because we have we're in alignment. We're in alignment with the good of the world to heal. And that's how I would describe it. And that's how it feels to me.
Yeah, and it's also you just invited in that that felt sense of the trust, right? Because when you are in that alignment, you have everything exists. All the highest good already exists. And so even if to the logical mind of form, we don't know what that looks like, is like, or we ever will know, there is this capacity to surrender to the process and to trust the process and trust that the good is already here in the perfect divine timing. So it actually relaxes the mind of form, because there's nothing the mind of form needs to do, to force, to make happen. It's this complete openness, and it goes beyond faith. It's a trust. It's
It's
a
a trusting and a knowing. I think it's
yes.
the knowing. The knowing is that you just know. And I think that's what brings these miracles into fruition, that
Yes.
knowing,
Yes.
without any hesitation or doubts that would block that.
Exactly. And so this is where it's such a beautiful point to end on, right? Because it's we all have an inner healer inside of us. And, it comes down to a choice, a focus, a choice, and an awareness. And those are the three flames that ignite that power within us, that healing power within us. And as we show up in this way for others, it's because we've also shown up in this way for ourselves that gives us the capacity to remember that. And this is the beautiful power of what she's talking about in the healing, is that it restores that sense of deep fulfillment, a sense of knowing the self and holding that open for others to know themselves too. It's just that's the power of miracles, right?
It is. It is.
It's a great chapter, isn't it?
It is. It's a great chapter. And so, yeah, I think this is a great place to end it as well. And let's come back here next week on Wednesday, and we will be going over chapter 5. Is that right?
That's right. It's a really fascinating chapter.
Chapter 5, the power of 12.
Yes, and interesting, because we've been talking about the power of 8, so now we're going to the power of 12. What's that all about? Well, you're going to have to join us next Wednesday live, ideally, so that you can share with us
Grab
your
the book.
experiences. Yeah.
We'll be on chapter 5. And yes, please join in with us. Any questions or comments? We would love to hear them.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your experiences. Thank you so much, Jennifer. This is always a pleasure sharing time with you
It's
and
always a
everyone here.
pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Everyone have a great evening.